We are located in the United States, in Hong Kong and in Singapore. We do strategic consulting for digitalization, including BIM, for owners around the world. We're going to share some experience that we have in that regard, and also some experience that we've had directly with banking facilities, including managing roughly 6 million square feet of space and more than 500 branch banks for a US-based financial institution. So what we'll talk about today are critical success factors when using BIM, and we'll go through several of those. The points being to understand the potential of BIM, to select how BIM will be used in order to further organizational goals, to develop the information requirements to support these functions, and to make a BIM adoption roadmap. Then we'll look at some specific uses that have to do with space inventory, occupancy management, rental chargebacks, and then just a final word on making sure that as you embark on this journey yourselves, you think about not only the long-term planning, but also the short-term gains so that you get some immediate satisfaction. So when considering BIM and the implementation of building information modeling, we have to think about these layers of accomplishment. First, what will we accomplish using BIM? How will this support our organizational goal and mission? What processes, what specific activities will be supported? What tools will be used? And what information will we need? We'll take a look at each of these points as we go through this presentation together. Most people already understand that building information models have a tremendous potential to bring together information that we know about all of our facilities anywhere in the world, and to be able to have all of this information in the same formats, in computable formats, so that our tools can quickly process, analyze, alert us to trends, warn us if there are difficulties coming up, and significantly reduce the time it takes to find information and manage our facilities. Some of the things that people immediately think of are, oh, I can put on 3D glasses and I can see a wonderful walkthrough of my facility. And this is very useful to educate staff, to inform decisions. It can help us introduce key features of a facility to the people who will dwell in it, and also for our leasing efforts. But there are other things we can do as well. Because the information is stored digitally and in a rational format, which is understandable by many systems, we can do all sorts of analysis to optimize the value we receive from these facilities. And those can be in terms of making sure that the facilities are comfortable, making sure that they're functional, making sure that we use the space well, and making sure that we support workers or residents who are inside the building. We can also use these tools to help us with preventative and predictive maintenance so that we can understand what tasks need to be done to keep all the systems in the facility functioning well. We can also use this to track our requests for service, our trouble tickets, so that we can see an overall view of what's happening with our facility at any moment, and organize many facilities so that we can better manage the labor force. We can also use it to help the people who are going to service the equipment, either for scheduled maintenance or to handle an emergency that arises, so that they can immediately, before they go into the situation, get a visualization of what the equipment looks like. They can see where it is in location to other portions of the building, and they can use their handheld tools or some other visualization to quickly get all the information they need about the piece of equipment to help them service it more quickly. It's also possible to do scenario planning and simulation. Scenarios can be as simple as, how do we show people how to exit a building in the case of an emergency? Or if we're doing renovations, how will we experience the building as the renovations take place and certain portions of the building are under construction? We can also use these tools, the BIM tools connected with Internet of Things for our systems and services, to begin to understand how we're using energy, water, other resources, and not only see what we're doing in this moment, but based on analysis of the patterns of use, to be able to predict what we will need in the future. This can be extremely useful, for example, if there are seasons of the year or parts of the day when we have a high cooling need, and we can understand how to purchase our energy or perhaps buffer and store our energy so that we can accommodate these spikes in need without having to go to more expensive resources. Also very useful for those who are concerned with green energy so that they can assure themselves that their storage capacity will meet their peak need. Perhaps most importantly, these digital systems give us the ability to integrate reporting from all these various aspects so that at an executive level, we can get a very quick dashboard view and a look to see, is this building functioning the way we anticipated, the way we planned, the way we budgeted, or is something going better than expected or worse than expected, in which case we can take intervention. So once we know all of these things, we can then begin to understand what our use cases will be. That is, how we will use BIM. We can understand what information we will need to support these uses, and therefore what information needs to be in the asset information model, the BIM, and we can then inform the creation of that asset information model, the BIM. This model can have many different kinds of information. It can have the geometry, so we know what things look like. It can have the data, so we know what things are. And it can have other related documents, for example, warranty information or maintenance information, so that we understand how to care for the systems in our building. And then anyone can get a quick report to get the highlights of this information, or they can look at more detailed documentation. So when we think of an information model, a building information model or an asset information model, we're really talking about a collection of many different kinds of information, some of it in database, some of it in file formats, and some of it organized with a unique indicator that will help us access online information. What we need to think about is what we're going to do, what processes we're going to support, the tools that we're going to use, and the data that we need. We said that at the very beginning of this exploration. This is taking those statements and putting them in much, much more detail. And we're going to follow one example to see how what the organization wants to do influences what they need to see in their information model. In this case, we're taking one of the prospects for this organization, operational excellence. They want to get the most out of their facilities. In order to do this, they're going to have many different uses for the modeling technology. They're going to want to do scanning, photometric scanning for existing conditions so they can know what they have. They know that they're going to want to do asset management. They're going to want to understand what is in their buildings, how to evaluate it, and how to maintain it. They also want to know about how the buildings are being used, how they're occupying the building, what departments are where, what spaces are being used, what spaces are available. And they're also going to want to do rental allocation so that whoever is in the facility will be paying, paying their rent, right? In order to do this, they're going to need a couple of tools. They're going to need building information modeling tools specifically designed for facility management. They're going to need other facility maintenance tools, which will help them manage the servicing of all the equipment. And they're going to have some access to their general ledger so that their internal groups who are occupying space can get a rental allocation chargeback that hits their GL. And for all these, they're going to need some data. They're going to need building information models and probably some drawings as well. They're going to need facility data, including who is occupying what space, and they're going to need some other data like current rental rates for their facilities. This seems very complex, and yet it really comes down to a simple statement of what information will be needed. Let's look at how those statements go together. The first thing we'd like to talk about is the difference between proprietary standards, meaning one brand, one vendor, the information produced can only function in that environment, versus open standards, which is a standard adopted by anyone who chooses to adopt it anywhere in the world. What we find with the closed proprietary software focused standards is that if we have different disciplines, such as architecture to do design, fabrication to make the systems, energy to do analysis and supply of utilities, if they're using different software which do not speak to each other, then there's no possibility to optimize and analyze a collection of information. Whereas if we use an open standard, such as Open BIM, which you can find at Building Smart International, then all of these different functions can speak the same language. Those of you who may be struggling with my English right now will have have sympathy for how important it is to have all of our systems speak a common language. Then we have to develop a plan to collect the data for the facility. It is very unlikely, especially for a large facility owner or an owner of many facilities, that they can, in one moment, gather all the information they need. It's important to do planning and follow that with implementation. The planning will look at the business requirements, such as those we've just spoken of. They'll want to develop a vision with objectives, that is, what will they accomplish, and targeting, which is what is the measure of success. If, for example, we say that we want to occupy our buildings, that's a good objective, but we need to measure what success in that category means. Are we looking for 100% occupancy, 98% occupancy, 80% occupancy? What is necessary in order to achieve our financial goals? And then a strategic roadmap to accomplish these things. In terms of the implementation and adopting BIM, it's wise to begin with a small project to prove the concept, make sure all the systems are working, make sure the staff are trained up and comfortable. And then to do a series of pilots. This is an example from one pharmaceutical company who decided the order in which they would do these pilots. The important thing is at each step, they gain more and more information. We mentioned that we'll talk about occupancy management and rental chargeback. Once we have the model in place and a data overlay system that allows us to give attributes to the spaces in the facility, We can ask quick questions. For example, is this space 1004 occupied or not? In this case, we see, oh, it's occupied. The system shows us this. That means I'm on my way to achieving my goal of occupancy for the facility. For rental chargeback, it's important to know for each of these rooms who's actually occupying the room. And in this case, we can see different departments of our organization are occupying different spaces. Commercial banking, for example, is occupying these three portions of this particular floor. Granted, this is a tiny toy example. The real examples from large facilities are too difficult to read. It gets all too small. With this, because we know the spaces they're occupying, the building information model can quickly calculate the area. It can understand the common areas, such as the lobby. It can understand areas which are typically allocated in a different way, such as the stairway. It can automatically compute the space that they're using in the facility and be able to apply the rental rate and give them the charge back. We can also look at other kinds of utilization. For example, the density. This particular organization has standards that they would like to follow of between 6 and 10 square meters per person for average staff, and a little bit more space for executives and people who require private offices. Because the building information model knows the occupancy and can very quickly calculate the area of these spaces, it can give a visual report to say, oh, this room 1001 is not being used effectively. There are more than 18 square meters per person in this space. So that helps us to understand how the space is being used. In this case, the occupancy information, which comes from tables that are arrived at either by survey or by having elements of the organization, departments in the organization, claim space or request space so that we know where they are, and the asset information model, the BIM, which knows the physicality of the space, together can go into a system that understands what's being occupied by whom and can calculate the rent, and then through a piece of middleware can actually impact the general ledger. That's a system we set up for one of our clients. In order for these systems to work, they need to be absolutely up to date and reliable. And because of this, the owner, after having established the requirements, needs to give those to the supply chain. In the case of building a building or doing renovations, those will be builders and design consultants. In the case of doing facility inventory, they may be consultants who are specifically in the business of looking at an existing facility and creating a model. In this case, when the information comes back and the owner receives the data, they need to verify that it's correct. Model checking software is a good way to do that as a double check. Anything that's wrong, they can send back into the supply chain to have it corrected. And then once it's approved, they can update their own internal databases so that they have reliable information. During operations, they may update these data to say equipment has been changed out, to update the occupancy map for who's occupying which spaces. This all happens with normal facility management. And in this case, the adopter of BIM will want to make sure that these systems are linked to their BIM system in some way. And then if it should come time to do a new project, a renovation, it's possible to compile a very accurate view of the facility, saving lots of time to go walk the facility and get new information, and then to be able to publish these existing conditions back into the supply chain. So, in summary, it's important to understand your business objectives and your operational efficiency objectives, and then to think about BIM, both in terms of long term planning, how we can do things like scenario management and understand facility use, and in terms of immediate action, such as finding we have a problem and being able to inform the people who will solve that problem to very quickly have the information they need and resolve the problem. You've seen a number of images in this presentation and some case study examples. We've provided this information about the sources for those, so you can check back. This is not to endorse any specific company or product or tool, but rather just to let you know where we found the information that we've shared today. So thank you very much.